always a challenge. Many steps.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July 2025 meeting of Scarborough Electric Corporation. You have two approvals.
Yes.
One is the May meeting minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments or questions about the meeting? Seeing like I get a motion to approve the May meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Excellent.
Okay.
And on the
Anything on the financial report?
sure, yeah, two things. One, by the end of this month, we should have June ready. And did everybody get the larger copy? Sorry, the copy in the packet was so small. Things happen. So by the end of this month, we'll have the year-end final done and we'll send that out. We don't normally have a meeting, so we'll I may ask you guys to approve via email because I don't want to wait till September, because hopefully the audit will start much sooner than it did last year. And then that would be the second piece is the audit did come in more expensive than we thought. We have the cash to cover it. It'll be drawn from part of it will be drawn from our fund balance, but that's what the fund balance is for. And it was unavoidable at that point. And we will be looking at using the town's auditor for next year. So that should go much more smoothly and be done.
I thought we used the town's auditor.
We did
That
not
was the change.
last year. Last year we took the recommendation from our previous auditor and worked with them, but it was an emergency situation at that point, so they were trying to fit us in.
Which is why it was.
Right. And yes. And so our recommendation in working with the town's finance director, it would be great to use their auditor. And so that's the plan for this year. The library is going to be doing the same thing, is my understanding. So it'll be one auditor that can coordinate. Won't be the one company, not the same auditor, different auditors for each project. And that should make things go more smoothly, theoretically, because the town's auditor, the company, will understand how the town works. So that was one of the issues with the previous auditor last year. There was a lot of, wait, we don't understand, because we have this hybrid system where they do our payroll, and the only thing that comes through us is the operating expenses. But they still have to audit the entire piece, salaries and all of that. So anyway, hopefully it'll be a much smoother and certainly for Magda and I, much less stress.
Will that cost be lower?
I'm hoping, yes, that's my understanding. That's my understanding. So I don't, it was estimated by the finance director last year to be about 5,000 under the new system. And I'm hoping that's really where it comes in. But we tried as much as possible to stop spending when we knew how much it was going to be. So some of that we can cover with just other categories that we stopped spending in, but it can't all be covered with that. So that's the important piece, is that we understand where we are tapping into fund balance a little bit to pay for the auditors' more expensive bills.
Any other questions? Comments? Can I get a motion to approve the current financial report?
So moved.
Second.
Favor? Okay. So next is a date on Dunstan Economic Dip.
Yes. So, as many of you know, a project came in uh, that really wanted to tap into doing a housing credit enhancement agreement, and that's for the old Marshview restaurant where the flea market has been. The applicant or developer bought that building or bought the lot, and they originally had proposed two projects. One was a workforce housing project, and it was affordable age restricted units. And that they did need a contract zone to do both projects on the lot. And the council did not like the contract zone as proposed. So the developer came back and said, well, we'll just do the senior affordable housing. So the town is taking the opportunity to say, that's great. You know, the council will need to make a decision on that housing CEA. But as part of that, we want to do an economic development tax increment financing district for Dunstan. We have one for Oak Hill and the Downs. What we wanted to do is say, you know, back in 2014, 2015, we'd had this study that was a project with Sustain Southern Maine. They did a charrette with some of the with the area residents, and they had a lot to say about how Dunstan, you know, if you step in and do some investments, then you might be able to retain or recreate some of the walkability, maybe capture some of the you know charm from some of the older buildings that were there and really make some investments in that area. So the town felt like this is an opportunity to provide the same types of investments that were happening in Oak Hill and the Downs via TIF. We can do that for Dunstan. And so that's why the council is going to be looking at the Marshwood project, but that's separate because that's a credit enhancement agreement. But they're looking at doing the tax increment financing district for the, you know, the really the commercial areas of Dunstan. And part of that is bringing into the TIF the vacant acres that you know really is part of Bob Harrisburg's project properties because there's a bunch of vacant land. So unlike the Downs where we knew there was a project coming in and we sort of knew the value, this is really perhaps aspirational, if you will, where we don't have an existing project for that vacant acreage. We do have some history of understanding what's happened in the area. And we're setting up a 30-year TIF so that we can capture new investment that's made. It doesn't make any difference it doesn't change the tax rate. It doesn't do anything to the existing property owners, but it does create an investment mechanism for the town to do other projects. And that's really where the Dunstan TIF came from. It's like this is our next village, and we want to provide the same types of opportunities and town investments that we did with Oak Hill. The council's going to vote on that. They're going to do a first reading and then set a public hearing on the 16th, so next week. I think what I wanted to do is make sure you were aware of why the town was looking at this, that it is related to the Marshview housing project, but it's not just because of that housing project. If we just wanted to do that alone, they could have said, we're going to just do a housing TIF like we did with Avesta. And they didn't want to do that. We want to do something, give the council an opportunity to look at a larger
So
investment.
this vote would include the TIF and the CEA?
Two separate things.
Separate things.
They could, they can create the TIF without saying yes to the CEA, but they can't say yes to the CEA without creating a TIF. So, and they could say, we don't want to do the bigger TIF, but we want to do the CEA, and we would go back and do just a housing CEA there. I don't think that's I don't think that's the desire of the council, but they haven't, the full council has not discussed that. And the finance committee is reviewing Marshview for a second time this afternoon at 5 o'clock. They, at their last finance committee, voted to recommend doing the economic development TIF to the full council, but the full council hasn't seen it yet. They will it'll go out in their packet this afternoon.
So what is on the 16th?
The 16th will be the first time the full council reviews it, so they'll set, if they choose, they'll create a first reading, they'll do a first reading and set a public hearing.
Okay, so the public hearing is not on the 16th.
No,
Okay.
no. But that gives us an opportunity to say, sort of in general, do we think this is this a prudent thing to do? Does it make sense, for the area? And I would leave that up to you guys to discuss.
Well, I mean, I just quickly, I mean, I think it does, I mean, I think, one, obviously know how. But I mean, I guess looking at the two projects, we know how badly housing is needed. So the credit enhancement agreement for the senior project, I think is good. In terms of the TIF, I mean, what are there thoughts as to what the end development looks like?
So back in 2014, and I can't remember if you were, when did you when did you buy your property? Yeah.
We bought it in 2011 and built in 2012.
Okay. So the concept was, there's this opportunity to create more of a central area, if you will, within Dunston. And one of the thoughts was really building, a road as development would come in for the 100 or so vacant acres that are back behind Bob Harrisburg's buildings, which are, with Gurley Antiques and Suburban Home Outfitters. Back in that area, there's, about 100 acres. Not all of that was taken into the TIFs because some of it faces really the other way.
Is it all developable?
Yes, given environmental constraints and things like that. Yeah, it's developable. There's wetlands, there's other things, just like every piece of land in Scarborough. And the idea was, there may be an opportunity to create another street back there that creates an opportunity to have some commercial facing that area. Now, is that a definite that we're going to do that? No, but that was one of the concepts that was done in, looking at opportunities in 2014. I think one of the things that came up at Finance Committee was, there are some environmental constraints, certainly in Dunston, because of the streams back there. It's an urban impaired stream, and you can use TIF funds to really invest in environmental infrastructure. So that may be something that happens. The way the TIF is set up,
You can or you can't?
you can.
Okay.
Yes, you can. You can use it for transportation. You can use it for the environmental infrastructure. You could create a revolving loan fund, which we did put in as one of the options. What the state does in your application is say, tell us all the things that you might want to use the funds for. And really that centers on transportation, infrastructure, environmental transportation, we put in the revolving loan fund, and then other general pieces of infrastructure can be done that way too. It does provide us the opportunity to do credit enhancement agreements, but we're not guaranteeing, but it does set up the opportunity. And that's one step closer. I don't want to say it like that. It's one less thing. If you do want to do a credit enhancement agreement, to have the TIF set up, then you're really only, when a project comes in, looking at the credit enhancement agreement itself. You're not trying to do both, setting up the TIF and the credit enhancement agreement. So that's part of that. That's what that story is. And I guess I'd love to hear from those who are particularly might be affected by any investments in Dunstan.
Well,
Yeah.
I remember this very well.
Yeah.
I remember when the charrettes were held, and in fact, it was a fellow by the name of John Charette, who was the architect that did the charrette.
That's funny.
And I can remember that the linchpin at the time was, where the middle school football team used to practice and where the AAA baseball used to be on that field.
Yep.
Right behind Harrisburg's property, right on the corner of Dunstan and Broadturn. And to hear you say that about, that those fields always got a little wet, especially in the spring for baseball. But it's a lot of land back.
Yeah.
And I believe at the time there was in that charrette were discussions of a potential road that would connect Payne Road to Broadturn.
Yep.
Which, living out on Broadturn like I do, that was, caught my attention at the time. And I know we used to, Andrea and I in particular, used to laugh and call it the foodie district, when Jim opened and On the Vine and now Terracotta Pasta. And, it's come a long ways just on its own in years. So I wasn't totally surprised when I saw that exercise was being referenced. And I've heard some of the chatter out there in the community that always seems to rise up whenever housing is discussed. But yeah, I think that this certainly should be explored. I mean, it's not new.
Right.
And predating the 2014 study. I mean, when you look at the history of Scarborough, Dunstan was a village with a very active commercial activity, a lot of commercial interests in Dunstan its entire life.
Yeah.
So I think this is interesting.
Okay.
Well, I would need to learn more of it to have an informed opinion, but I think development in the area would be a positive thing.
Is the road and the development, the 100-acre, is this more residential or would it be commercial?
Well, it would be a mix. If the road, and again, that's not a certainty, that's just, it's a development concept that came from the public sector, not from the private sector. So along that road would be probably commercial, but there's enough depth that I think multifamily is what you're probably looking out in the back. What we did is I took the proposal from, or the discussions from the charrette and from the work that Sustained Southern Maine did, and I looked at their forecast. They explored the existing zoning within Dunstan, and there's between TVC and the different areas, they felt like they were said conservatively there would be there could be 150,000 square feet of new commercial development. I backed that off because that seemed, you know, um, aggressive. Plus, we've had since the time that that study was done, On the Vine has come in, and there's been some redevelopment, a little bit of commercial. So I backed that off a little bit, and they had 400 to 500 housing units. Again, I backed that off a little bit because, Avesta came in, and it felt like that was probably more than we would see, but those forecasts don't really, they're not doing anything except telling the state, hey, this is one scenario that could happen. It doesn't lock us into anything. It's just saying, we need you to tell us what you think might happen out
I
there.
probably have the file somewhere,
Yeah,
but as I, as I recall, it was kind of like there would be some commercial development along that kind of like that area of Payne Road leading behind On the Vine.
Yep.
And then the residential was
Further
behind
back.
that.
Yes.
So like it didn't have an outright impact on Route 1. Nothing was on Route 1, as
Yeah.
I recall.
There's opportunity for infill, I think, around Route 1. And it is, yeah. And there is one of the things that I think is unique to Dunston, and is that it does have older buildings that could have some charm if we could figure out how to, pull them together and create more connections between them. But if you go down and you look at all the properties in Dunston, there's a fair amount of property created in the early 1900s. And I'm not an architect, but it seems like if there was ever a possibility to create this more traditional village, it's Dunston as opposed to Oak Hill. But I mean, like, when was your
My house.
yeah, what was the date?
Well, we've tried to research it through the historical society
Yeah.
and everything, but I would imagine based on the construction that was probably built either in the late 1700s or early 1800s.
Yeah,
When we replaced the doors, when we first moved in, there were blacksmith nails that were obviously pounded
wow,
in the building,
yeah,
front part of the structure, so. It'd be nice if we could be paid a stipend for historical preservation in our house, you know.
mhm. Well,
But, yeah, that area is nice.
yeah,
We, when you talk about the old structures, we had the old Oddfellows building, the Sonic Hall, that maybe could have done something there, and that the historical society owns it now. But I don't know what you're gonna do with the 4-lane highway going down.
I know. Yeah, I think that's still one of those things that is up in the air, and I shouldn't say it like that. Like, I think as we begin to explore opportunities for this area, I think we will probably renew our effort to figure out how to divert at least some traffic to the turnpike.
When you say that, because that sustained Southern Maine study also included the northern part of Route 1 in Saco.
Yeah.
And that, I always remember Tom had like initial discussions, and it was around that time where they were talking about another turnpike exit on Flag Pond Road.
Yeah,
Something, but it never really got any, it kind of just went away.
that's right. And I think there are some opportunities to, this is just me speaking, but I think there are opportunities to renew some conversation with the turnpike. They've redone the Saco exit, which was supposed to really make it more efficient to use the turnpike if you're getting off in Saco. So whether or not that's happening, I don't know. But I think one of the things that we talked about long ago was also asking, hey, Turnpike, could you maybe make it free as an experiment from Portland to Saco or maybe even Biddeford, for a period of time so we can see, does that, if it was free, would that divert traffic? Is that a reason people don't use the turnpike? I don't know if it is. I mean, I think it has something to do with that. But I think we have a renewed interest in figuring out, not that we're going to close Route 1 down to 2 lanes, although I do have to point out that the proposal from DOT for fixing the Route 1 elevation, yes, is 2 lanes, not 4. So, and
Wow,
I know, and we're like, that's
a lot of funneling.
yeah. And we've asked them to give us a little more information about how they think it works. And since that funding has sort of temporarily gone away, or it certainly isn't going to happen this year, when I found that out, I sent to the town engineer, I said, somebody needs to do some modeling. If you're gonna, because they had asked me to go out to businesses for support. I said, nope, I am not going to do that until you explain, or until they can better explain what that does to traffic. Because the last thing I want to do is go down and say, whoops, we're going to take all this traffic and funnel it into 2 lanes, for a short time and then open it back up. I mean, think of the traffic right now going through along Route 1. So they need to do some work before I'm willing to even
Yeah.
discuss that with people. Let's see some numbers about what that means. So anyway, that's part of the question. What happens, what is going to be the final proposal, and does that change how we view Dunstan? Is it enough to divert people and say, I'm not going to go through that, I'm going to take the turnpike? And therefore it creates a little more balance in the traffic. And that's good news, bad news. Bad news is you're probably pulling some customers off. Good news is, do you create more opportunity for customers because it's a nicer environment to be wandering around in? I don't know the answer to that. Um, I don't know if you have.
So what's the negative of not having a TIF?
I think that
Because
we don't have the investment.
create some parameters around what
Right.
can be built and what can't be built, or
Really, because the zoning still does that.
okay.
All it does is create an investment opportunity. Um, and for the new development that comes in, we get to shelter it from our, the county tax, and the doesn't affect the school funding formula. And what am I leaving out? Oh, the municipal revenue sharing.
When you said it creates an investment vehicle, what instrument, what is that? What exactly are you?
So what that means is the town gets to say, for that money that we're using and we're sheltering, we have the ability to save funds to do a project, which you can't really do with your regular taxes. You can't say, I'm going to save 20% and do this project 2 years from now. You have to use those funds. You can bond something.
Yeah.
But the TIF allows you to actually save money for a project. It
Okay.
also, because of the new value, it allows you to say, hey, I'm going to use all of that new value to support infrastructure or other projects in the area, or I can create a credit enhancement agreement. So it gives you some opportunities. There's no guarantee. It's all about how much new investment comes in. If those vacant acres don't develop, there's really not going to be a lot of new investment that we can capture. But it does give us that opportunity.
Just proactive legwork is
Yeah,
really what it is.
exactly.
You get a viable project to come through. you don't
Right.
have to go through this step in the future,
right.
right? Like, I think that's all it seems like it is to me.
Yeah, and it does say, you, the, the council is not bound. They can change the amount of, the percentage of the new development that goes into the general fund versus into the TIF fund. They can change that.
Hmm.
It's not, they can change it on an annual basis if they want to. But it does give them the opportunity to do that. And again, any new development gets, helps us out with the, shift, like protecting, by not having new development, the value of the new development, our school funding formula goes down and our municipal revenue sharing goes up and the county taxes go down. So there's that benefit that happens, with the new development. And, depending on whose forecast you look, it's probably about 40 to 50% return on that at this point. It changes. When we first did the Oak Hill TIF, we were really at about 5%, and that's because with the school, we were what they call a minimum receiver. And so we got very little money from the state, but we are not a minimum receiver anymore. So we are generating a good investment from the state at this point.
Well. I mean, I think purely from an economic development, I mean, if our mission is to promote economic development, then I mean, I think an economic development TIF makes sense. I think, sounds like we think that, as Kevin said, it should definitely be explored. I think in terms of what the eventual development looks like, we're not there yet.
Well, we wouldn't know.
And we
We're
wouldn't- yeah.
we're gonna create the TIF first, and
Yeah.
we're gonna say, hey, over 30 years, we'll see what happens.
Right. But again, also, I mean, I think with the CEA for the housing, I think we've on a number of occasions discussed how, how housing is needed and,
Right.
so I mean, I think we could say that we are supportive of exploring it. I mean, is that, what are you,
I am.
what are you looking for from the board at this point?
So I'd like everybody to check in on the July 16th meeting to listen to what's being said. And then if we feel comfortable, one of two things. One, I think it would be helpful if you want to, someone from the board to speak at the public hearing, positive or negative, depending on what you guys think. On the alternative, we can also write a letter that explains why we do or do not support the economic development TIF.
Well, I mean, I can just say if I'm available the night of the public hearing,
Okay.
I'm happy to speak for or against. I guess my question would be, will we have a meeting in between the 16th and the public hearing?
See, we don't usually. We can, or we could do a quick Zoom meeting to check in after the 16th. If that makes sense to everybody.
Well, I just know summers are tough.
Yeah.
I mean, we can try, or we can. If we could get maybe a summary of what comes
Sure.
out of the 16th by email,
Yes.
we can, maybe there could be a working group that meets,
Okay.
I don't want to make anything required
Okay.
with summer schedules. So maybe we could do something like, here's a summary of what came out of the 16th. Here's a time, anyone is welcome to be on the call who can make it.
Okay.
We have a Zoom call where we try and come up with some sort of a position,
Okay.
and then someone can speak at the.
Did you include the link to the
Yes.
workshop and that?
Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any? Someone should be having to see.
On to the project as a whole, and
Yeah.
development is inevitable, especially in this town. So-
Yeah.
So you're creating something that the public invests in, right? To help
Yeah.
build the infrastructure to support what's gonna be built by private individuals,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, so the argument against it is you don't want to develop at all.
I think that's part of it. Oh, Alan, I'm sorry, Alan's got his hand up over there.
Well, it's in regards to a couple of things, actually. One, I would concur with what John said in terms of being in favor of the TIF. But the other thing I just wanted to point out a little earlier was during the discussion of the Route 1 corridor across the marsh. And I'm not exactly sure what opening up the turnpike might do from, say, Portland to Biddeford. And the only reason why I say that is we had a traffic study that indicated that 75% of the traffic going across that area and actually utilizing Route 1 was local traffic. It was not traffic coming from other towns. So how can you get a bulk of the people that are actually traveling from Scarborough onto the turnpike? You really can't at this point, unless there was an interchange in the Dunstan area or, off Broad Turn or something like that. So I'm not sure how effective the study would be from Saco or Biddeford. I think it would be minimal because supposedly we have minimal traffic coming from that area now.
Excellent point, Alan. I think it can't be the only solution. And, it's just, we need to come up with, particularly if it is gonna get narrowed down to one lane. And I don't know, yeah, if it's all local traffic. Alan, I don't know. I think it's one of many things that has to be looked at. And, if some of it could get diverted, I suppose that makes sense, but that's a good cautionary note. Not to get our hopes up.
Just as an aside, I think when that exit 36 opens up in Saco, every exit off the main turnpike is to the east. And it funnels traffic to Payne Road, to Route 1. And that one down there, it's gonna funnel the traffic right directly onto Route 112 on the west side. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, for me, coming from the south,
Yeah.
taking exit 36 and accessing 112 to get out on Broad Turn Road is gonna cut, I won't be on Route 1.
Yeah. Well, you remember when the Turnpike came to us to talk like
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago, they talked about what, they think that Saco exit is gonna do, that it's gonna be attractive. So that's one other piece that we have to look at. So I think Alan's right, we have a lot of things up in the air.
Absolutely.
And there's gonna have to be some deep thinking about, how we address traffic throughout the town, but especially if the Route 1 does narrow to 2 lanes. And Alan, remind me, the long range planning discussed a little of this last meeting or the meeting before. I can't remember. I remember us discussing the narrowing of that corridor.
Yeah, that might have been the meeting before, and unfortunately, that's the one I missed due to my surgery.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
So on the so you can let us know what happens on the 16th.
Yes,
We'll then set, maybe we can use one of like a Thursday at 2
sure.
to do a call for anyone that can make it.
Okay,
We'll take an hour to try and come up with a position, and then someone can speak at the public hearing.
okay. Okay.
Hey, who's
I think Jason might be on board. Yeah.
Sure. Recently, we came across food handlers licenses. So food handlers licenses, the the license fees were increased dramatically, and I kind of brought it up and wanted to have a discussion on that. Really approaching it for two separate aspects of it. And I wanted to make sure it's not just coming from me as a business owner, but for like small business owners out there that are affected by it as well. So stores like mine in town and Jim and any retail stores in town are subject to a food handler's license. Traditionally, it always been $220 for the entire year. Always renewed at the beginning of June. And this year, we got our renewal reminders beginning of May with brand new rates on there. So mine personally went up to $600 from $220, triple.
Wow.
Now, like I said, there's two aspects to it. First of all, we weren't made aware of it until we got this letter in the mail. And as a small business owner, when your fee is tripling, that's a lot. Without any heads up on it. I know we spoke here before of how we can help small businesses and what we can do for them. Having the small businesses be part of this discussion before we even get there and being let in on what the actual rates are before we get this letter in the mail, I think is key, like that communication, because as I discussed with both of you too, I'm paying this fee. It gets putting my personal hat on. I'm paying this fee, but I don't know what I'm getting for it other than just the privilege to do business in town. I did find out we do get inspected, but it's just by the fire department. And it's your normal inspection that comes through that way. To put into comparison, that was a $600 fee. Our license fee to the state for our agency liquor license, 99% of our business is $700 for the entire year. So that one is kind of a little bit out of whack in my head. And we also pay an state agriculture fee where they actually come out, they inspect, they go through, they look for any potential issues. That's $20 a year. So when, kind of looking at that fee again, it's excessive in my opinion. And one last little kind of example on there, a few doors down from us is Phyrexian Life Games, where he's actually built a really interesting business for himself where he does it's a retail store. He sells like fantasy role-playing games, but every night he has guys that go in there that play, and they're there for 2 hours, they're there for 3 hours. So we ended up bringing in snacks and bringing in soda, selling it at cost, just as convenience to his customers going in there. And he was subject to this fee too when it went up to $400. So, and he's not making any money. So at this point, he's like, I either pay this fee or I sacrifice my customer service to my local, dedicated customers coming in, which a small business owner should not be put out there to make that decision. And I guess I don't know what to expect if there any can be change done, but I think on that side, bringing the small business owner into that discussion early of making them aware that there is a change coming up, so we can kind of adequately prepare on our back end for that increase.
Is this saying that they had not done any changes to the registration fee and since 2010? So they went 15 years.
I think that's, wow.
I wouldn't be
I don't know
surprised
about that. I'll have
So
to-
that might be something else to evaluate is rather than these huge jumps every 15 years,
Right.
Make it more incremental.
And I did some quick kind of Google searches for like surrounding towns too.
Yeah.
A lot of them, the fees were a lot less. Some towns are only $50. Some of them only like restaurants were subject to it and not stores. Like we sell, other than alcohol, we sell bag chips and soda, so that's the other aspect of this entire license is really who is a food handler and who should be subject to this, because and if you look at it, we're paying more. Again, I try not to make this personal, make my business into it, but as an example, we're paying more than places actually serving pizza and then actually serving subs because they don't have spirit. So we're actually paying a higher fee than people that are actually handling food. So there's a lot to it. I get it.
Jason and I talked about this. I mean, I think unfortunately, Tom and Jonathan Anderson aren't here, which I think would have been helpful for them to get this feedback. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can let them know that this was discussed today.
Yeah, I think they know that because I had forwarded some comments to Tom early on regarding this.
Yeah.
So,
But I was, again, I think there's two things. I mean, I think one, the way that this was come up
Right.
with and announced left a lot to be desired in terms of, in terms of the notification, and you received it, what, 2 weeks before it was due?
It was, yeah, they sent out the letters May 1st and it's due June.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a month and it's all.
So I think that,
Was the process of suggesting or presenting an increase, a public discussion?
at the council level, because they have to approve the fee increases. And there's a administrative ordinance that lists all the fees that the town charges, and that's gets updated.
This is a town council decision?
Yes,
On a,
but there certainly wasn't any sort of notice that went out there
Right.
saying this is being discussed, and here's a,
No, it's probably
dear-
part of the budget,
dear
right? Like,
business
this is-
owners,
These are,
please.
Yeah.
it's just part of the
And I
budget.
think that's the biggest issue on my end. Again, I get, yeah, you haven't reviewed in the 15 years, costs go up, right? You know, it's
Yeah.
going to go up. Like I freely admit that, but just how it wasn't
Mhm.
presented, and they have all of our contact information.
Sure.
To send us these letters for renew, so they know how to get a hold of us. It would have been, like I said, it would have been great if we were contacted before it even hit the council, so we could at
Right.
least go there and be part of the discussion.
right.
Because I don't know if it's fully understood that retail stores that aren't making food are still subject to this license. Like that's, I don't know that, but if we were involved early, that could have been kind of brought up.
But that's still something that I think can be addressed. I mean, we don't,
Because you
you
have a
can leave
liquor
the fee
license.
alone,
Well,
but
yeah, I mean, and I mean, well, the second part of it, and I think this may have been avoided if there had been more input.
Right.
I think there may have been some unintended consequences of the fees, and I
Yeah.
think, the fact that, when you look at the fees, that there are these classes with different levels, I think you could have easily said, okay, well, this is really for restaurants,
Mhm.
just because Hertz sells candy bars and chips that are
Right.
prepackaged, they shouldn't be facing the same food handler's license that a restaurant is. And
Right.
like Jason said, paying more than a restaurant that just serves beer because he's a liquor store that happens to sell candy bars.
And-
And so I think those are some of the things that could have been explained
Sure.
and maybe
Mhm.
handled differently.
Right.
And so if there are new ways to work that in going forward, that would be
Absolutely.
very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, clearly that's something that we could have sent out a note to folks saying, hey, the council's discussing fees, but it was part of discussion of fees for every, a regular discussion. And we probably should have done that, but
Was this a topic that was specifically targeted?
no.
Or was it part of, we need to increase our budget and everything gets more expensive?
It's
Yeah,
like beach passes went up.
right.
These are all the different fees.
So what is the intention with the increase in revenues? What is going to be done with this? Is it just to pay the costs?
I think it's paying costs. I'm not sure I have a good answer for that.
I think Jason has
yeah.
a point. What do we get back? for?
Yeah, right. And I do know that I think the clerk did, and I should have asked her for the info on it. I think she looked at a bunch of different towns and found similar types of things in terms of the fees. So let's see which one she looked at and see if there are others. But they did this as a broad brush of not just, they weren't looking at this fee in particular, they were looking at,
Mhm.
planning fee, every fee that we charge.
Where did that in?
There's an administrative ordinance within, if you look at ordinances within the town, there's an administrative category, and in that is the fee structure for the town. And they review that. I don't know if they review it. I think they review it annually. Yeah, I would have to look. I don't think every fee changes annually, but um, this was a wholesale change of a bunch of different fees.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there an additional $50 application fee with this?
Yeah.
Wouldn't
Is
that
there?
cover the
Okay.
paperwork and the labor involved with the 10 minutes, actually, well, 4 minutes of actually paying?
Okay.
Yeah, it was a $50
Like it-
application fee for all of them, which didn't exist prior either. It was a straight 220 before that.
Okay.
I mean, it would just seem to me like, again, like if you're looking at these different classes and it's like, no liquor. It seems to me like there could be a class like no food, I don't know how to explain it. Like,
No,
I mean,
in
no food being served, I mean,
Right.
something like
but
that,
it,
that could
but it
lower it.
almost calls it out too, because so we would fit under, and again, we fit under the grocery and convenience store if they sell prepared foods like pizza or chicken, but we fall into that. I'm not sure. And again, shame on me, because when we first opened up, we need to get all these licenses. And I'm like, all right, I'm applying. And never read the fine print
Mm.
until 6 years later when it
Yeah.
turned. So now,
Right.
obviously it's something that should have been on my radar before, but now since
Right.
that went up, it's kind of like, all right.
Well,
So you're paying a
Don't have a
food
choice.
handler's,
Right.
you're paying food handler's fee and a liquor license.
I'm paying a food handler's fee, a liquor license, and a state food fee.
Right.
Yes.
But none of your foods that you're selling are prepared foods.
No.
Okay. Let me
Yeah.
go through that and see what we can figure out. I think the notice is absolutely
Mhm.
something that should be addressed. That should be easy. Um,
Hmm.
and let me explore what I need to better understand, like, what does this license do versus the liquor license versus
I'd be
Um,
interesting. So you take somebody like I don't know, like Marshalls in town or somebody like
Right.
that who is selling chips
Chips.
and candy.
Right,
I think,
yeah.
like, are they paying this as well? Because that's essentially what we're doing.
Right.
Right.
So
yeah,
I don't.
And is it because they're not selling alcohol that they don't have to pay this?
No,
Or-
they would still they would have to do
400.
a full
Oh, yeah.
if it applied to them too, they would fit into the 400. So I don't know.
right.
What the parameters are. Yeah.
Right.
Let
And if
me
it's
ask,
because we have liquor, then fine. Like, I
Okay.
get that end of it.
but wouldn't it be, I was assuming that part of this is you're serving the liquor, as in if you were doing a tasting or something like that. But it seems to me you might be better off with, hey, you doing the $50 temporary when you do a tasting and I don't know whether or not that's the option.
Yeah, no, that could fit in there.
Sure.
I think that, but that,
A lot of fun.
What now?
I'm sure the paperwork and the application and the whole process.
Yeah.
Is fun.
yeah,
So let's just,
Well worth the time.
yeah, let's just explore how we could make this more streamlined and
Yeah.
and help people understand.
There's a lot of ambiguity with
Yeah.
in the office too, but they didn't know what to do with me at this moment. As
Right.
this moment- I don't know. That's frightening.
Sorry, that,
And I see down here, specialized
Like
processing
processing.
facility.
yeah,
Yeah.
It didn't occur to anybody in the office that that was
yeah.
a
And,
box.
right, and these are two different, just to make sure, like, the
Oh.
first 1, 2, 3, the first 4
Oh,
bullets are from our ordinance.
That's
This other piece is from the state, because I was trying to figure out, usually we're following, state law by doing this, and then this is what I found from, in terms of the general description of what they were intending. And it does seem like there's some wiggle room here. And so, and even I will say that when the chamber did their annual meeting 2 weeks ago or last week, I can't remember, it all blends together after a while. None Such was coming and doing, uh, serving. And it's like, okay, what license are they using to serve? And because Hannaford wanted to know, because they were using Hannaford Hall, and they just wanted to make sure everything, all the
Mhm.
boxes were checked. And I think there was some confusion of what was needed. None Such and the town were straight, but I think the chamber and Hannaford may not have been. Anyway, it was a confusing situation. And if you're going and doing and serving liquor, I always thought it was you have an off premises liquor license, but you can also have a catering license to serve the alcohol offsite. And I think that's what they had. Plus they had done, I think, the temporary, $50 one. So yeah, there's a lot of confusion in there. And uh, I think it's worthwhile to have an explanatory piece that's on the website along with the ordinance, and just saying, here's when they're renewed, just give a small business person or any business person, here's a heads up, here's what's going on. This is what this license does. This is what, you know, these two licenses do. Let's just separate that out and really address even more than the food handling license. And by the way, this is for the company. Your employees have to be certified. They have to do the food handling class, right?
I don't think they have to,
Okay,
but, it's nice to be able to say to the general public, we're,
Yeah.
safe handling.
Okay.
food. We are all trained. I
Okay.
don't know that it's a prerequisite.
okay. All right, so,
Maybe, but
yeah,
we
we'll
do it because we want everyone to.
feel good. Yeah. So let's see, the bare minimum that will come out of this, I think, is a clarification of who this should really apply to, and the development of some guidance that can be put online that says, if you do these types of things, you need to get this license. If you're selling potato chips and sodas, you don't need it. And I think,
I think it's even more complicated. We have a liquor license, but it's a retail liquor license, no
Yeah.
on-site consumption. So we make sandwiches and we have a liquor license.
but
We're
it's to
paying
sell
an
it.
extra $100 as though we were serving.
So yeah, I think we need to get this, I think we need to sort that out. So that's what I can do, and if I can tap into you two guys to make sure that
And say if there's questions, if you
we can,
help explain
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
If-
because like to your point earlier, these almost read like for restaurants and bars, like that's really
Well,
what it
it's,
kind of reads like. to
and when
me.
you read the license required under section 3, it's prepared and or processed or served. So it's food and drink served to the public. So I think it needs to be prepared and or processed and served so that it's actually being prepped and
Mhm.
processed in your place, and you're selling it and serving it.
Right. And then the distinction between you're just selling it versus you're serving it.
Right.
If you sell
Right.
something, that doesn't mean it's served.
Served, right.
Um,
That's why I think
Yeah,
that can be where that might help address.
okay.
It's that or that
It
gets
just
in the
seems
way.
for something that affects so much of the population of Scarborough, for it to be sort of a surprise on.
Yeah,
day to get to it.
Yeah,
yeah,
okay. I think
that's
this is
valid.
excellent, and we
Valid.
need to, we can affect some change here on that.
And it does, I think the moral of the story would be that, or the encouragement of the story would be to really look at administrative fees every year, as a small business or any business, to really understand what's being changed.
Yeah, and I will double check to see whether or not,
And is that
Yeah,
public? That must be public information. right?
Yeah.
The fee structures.
yeah, I'm gonna look to see whether or not we really didn't change these fees for 15 years.
Yeah,
Um, so, yeah, I mean, not that everybody wants fees raised, but let's do a little more often, so it's
Yeah.
not, it's sort of like the, revaluations,
Yeah.
like, let's not do them every 15 years, let's
Right.
do them sooner.
Yeah.
Is there any way to connect the dots to what it's funding?
Mm,
I can
This is a
ask.
lot of money.
mhm.
Well, and I can certainly say, tell us how much money we're generating in these fees
Mhm.
at a minimum.
Now you have double or maybe close to triple the receipts.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if that came,
Was-
and then if that came along with some sort of education for employees, or it came along with something else, then,
right.
then, yeah, like, obviously, like. You're internally training your staff that way, but if the town provided something.
Yeah,
Other
Mm,
than, like I said, it was just, they just came through recently, I don't know if it's because I said something or not, but. They just, it's just a fire department, 10 minutes checking all your exit lights and everything like that. And it was conveniently happened not too long after I sounded the alarm.
right,
Um,
right.
But that's really all
Oh,
that.
you have big mouths.
You're gonna get audited, you're gonna get audited with the IRS. But that was really the only thing that I've seen, like, no one has ever asked me for that license, no one has ever come.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the only thing, was just
Right.
him and come and verify that my exit lights work.
Right, and I suspect they let people self-select too, like if you thought you needed this license and you
Yeah.
paid for it, they're just billing you every year, they're
Right,
not
exactly.
checking to see, do you really need this?
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that could be that
Mhm.
situation
Yeah.
Mhm.
for our.
Yeah.
Our situation, but
All right, so I'm gonna do several things, let me repeat them, make sure I have them all. One, we want to know how much is being generated by the fees. And they should know in the next month or so, because they will be collecting them, right, because they're due June 30th.
June first.
June 1st,
Yes, yeah,
okay.
yeah, so they should.
Right,
Approximately how many businesses do we have in town?
we've got 1,400, call it maybe even 1,500 if we count all the ones that are not necessarily incorporated.
Yeah.
Are not incorporated, not necessarily incorporated. So about 1,500 businesses. Yeah, and we can isolate like what we think the number of you know, retailer food who deal with food. We can look at that. So I'm doing that. I'm gonna look at what the period that of the time in between the changes. Was it 15
Mhm.
years? If so, yeah, we get that there might be a bigger increase. And three, let's identify how they can help inform people of any changes to fees or regulations, and for look into what's our definition of who needs to really have this?
Mhm.
What does the clerk determine? What does she use to determine whether or not somebody needs it?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the third one is most important.
Yeah.
I think it's just that communication out there of. Again, it would be nice to know what all of this money is
It
used
should be
for.
absolute public.
Yeah,
What is the average business pay? Like a guy is just selling widgets, fire extinguishers, baseball cards. What is a business license in town? cost?
Well, technically, there's no business license.
So it's just people, just food handling.
Yeah, there's food handling. I think there are a couple of other categories, but there's no general, like, the only people who have to register is if you are not incorporated. And then I don't know if there's a fee for that. It might be a $50 fee. I'll have to look. But if you're a sole proprietor, we ask you to register. But if you're incorporated, we don't. And they've talked long, they've long talked about, you know, should we implement a registration, type of licensing. And like, I hate the word licensing because it implies, like you're talking about, that there's something that needs to be regulated in there. Whereas what I think they're really talking about, they want a registration system so they know who's out there, and how they can get in touch with them, certainly the fire department if something happens. But that's different from a license that says, we're going to authorize you to do this activity.
Mhm.
So we've been I've been pushing them, if you want to do something, it's a registration program, not a licensing program. But so far it's been in debate for like 5 years, I'm gonna say, in terms of what that would look like. And that's one thing that we would want to bring particularly small businesses into and say, this is what we're talking about for some type of registration program with the state, with the town.
Ellen has his hand.
Oh, sorry, Alan.
Well, I apologize, I'm kind of cutting in here. I have to leave at 9:30, but I did have one question I wanted to ask to the group or John, specifically regarding the meeting that I missed. Did anything happen, John, to the meeting UI and Travis had regarding board members?
Yes, I am sending the letter to the appointments committee and working through that, hopefully to have everything checked off in September. But I think we did not wind up hearing from
We did not.
the one board member, and we just said, all right, we'll deal with that in December when we have you, I think, and it may be Jim
So
that's
the
in.
appointment is, so Andrea and Kevin are being reappointed
Yeah.
now. We talked about that. We talked about the one of the three candidates that we liked. We did reach out to her, but we did not hear back. And if you recall, none of the candidates had necessarily listed SEDCO as their top choice. It was just a choice.
Correct.
So I just don't know how much, I called, I left her a message, never heard back. I mean, we could always reach out again, but I think we then just sort of talked about being a little bit more proactive going forward. People, if they had ideas for candidates, to get them to Karen. Karen Magna could maybe even keep a data, like a list of
Mhm.
possible people. Instead of, we also talked about, instead of going to someone and saying, hey, you want to join tomorrow,
Right,
saying, we're gonna have some spots opening up in 6 months. Is this something you might want to do then? And just giving a little bit more notice, but just being in general, being a little bit more proactive, seeking people out that you might want, rather than getting three people that may or may not want to even join.
right.
Yeah, I think we've been much more effective when we've personally reached out to somebody. And I'll use Helen as an example. Much more receptive if we have a chance to talk with them personally and see if they want to be involved. Okay, thank you.
So we've got about 20 minutes left.
Yep, I think we can do it.
Okay,
I think we can do it. Would you did the housing brief first, because I think that's shorter and we can
Sure.
check that off.
Yep.
So I did provide this brief that I did really just to help people understand where the housing market is. It was used, some of the information was used in the housing workshop that the council had a few weeks back. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys had that. And then I wanted to ask how you guys felt about maybe reaching out to the Housing Alliance and having a joint discussion on workforce housing and, what that means to economic development and how this board really thinks about that. And I know what we've said is we think the workforce housing, or understanding the relationship, there is a relationship between housing and and jobs. So I don't think we went that much further, but we put it in our agenda that we are concerned about creating housing for people who work here. So that's what I wanted to do, is just really check in on that. The council at their workshop with the Housing Alliance said, hey, this is great. We want a little more direction on where we think the marketing, where the market doesn't meet the demand. And so I think we can do that. And that's something the Housing Alliance is gonna focus on. But I think the difference between sort of general housing comments and trying to figure out where the market is there's there's a sense that over the last, decade, let's say, Scarborough's been pretty active in the housing market. We've been creating new housing. But the housing prices are going up. The apartments that are being created are definitely higher than what most people can higher than what many people can afford. And so even though we're creating a lot of housing, we still have these pockets where there's a mismatch. And I think that's the thing. Do we want to reach out and say to the Housing Alliance, we'd like to work with you, particularly on workforce housing? They've talked about at their last meeting, really having some interviews with different developers and finding out what some of the, if there are zoning issues or other types of issues in terms of making more affordable units. And then add to that, pass this out for you, the summary of LD 1829, which is the bill that was passed and is going into effect, that really deals with eliminating the growth cap for the development areas, your specified growth areas. And if you have a growth area with water and sewer, then the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. So there has to be water and sewer. If we put water and sewer out west of the turnpike, and they can do 5,000 square feet lots, that is a huge amount of development that could happen. Because right now we have a cap on the housing. So anyway, there's a lot of issues that are happening with 1829. Certainly the planning department is working through what that means to us, like what this is going to be. So I just wanted to make you aware that's sort of separate from do we want to work with the Housing Alliance? So I just want to check in with how we want to proceed on looking at economic development links with respect to housing development. So roundabout saying, they're saying there's lots of weird things happening in housing right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I saw an article the other day that said the average home price in Maine has gone up 80%.
Yeah,
in like
COVID.
5 years.
Since COVID.
I don't know how anyone affords a house.
I don't.
I don't know how I can share that dream with employees
Mhm.
making $20 a month.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, we're providing stipend. I mean, some communities we don't, but can provide stipends for distance, because they're driving for so long, because they can't afford to be closer.
I mean, is the thought that we would just meet with them at some point to kind of start? I mean, I think.
Yes, I think it would be great of us to acknowledge, number one, we do believe housing, the availability of housing and the availability of housing that is affordable to the general workforce categories that's established in the zoning ordinance. We think that does affect economic development. I think we said that last time around. So I think it's helpful for us to reach out to the Housing Alliance and say, to the extent you would like to chat about workforce housing in particular, we would like to do that. And between that,
interested to know, yeah, I think, I mean, I would be interested to know I mean, there was obviously that project that we just discussed on
Right.
Route 1. I mean, there was an article that came out where people were against the workforce housing portion of it, and there were some accusations of NIMBYism and, so I mean, I would be interested to see how Scarborough is thought of in terms of workforce housing and,
Yeah, but Kevin, if I was quoted a year or two ago that new construction costs were, around $300 a square foot, is that? Is it more than
A
that
lot
now?
higher now.
Huh?
It's
Yeah,
a lot higher now.
so 1,000 square foot home would be $400,000 just in production
Mhm.
costs.
Mhm.
So how do you make that cheaper? Do you have to get subsidies from the state or the federal level? Do we need to have another depression to economically reset everything? And no one wants that, right?
let's take that off the list.
Let's not have another pandemic.
Yeah,
That's
right, right,
drove all
That,
of
that
these
just made
people.
rich people richer and everything more expensive.
right,
Well, it drove everyone to Maine.
Well, yeah.
right, right. Wow. Right. So I think there are two things. One, that workforce housing piece where we see the gap. We're building housing. It's not like we're not building housing here in Scarborough. I think other towns are not necessarily building housing. We are. But that hasn't helped us in the affordability
No.
piece.
Right.
So what do you do? How do you identify what that gap is? And one of the reasons to meet with developers is to say, what are are there are there ordinance restrictions, which of course there are, they'll say, are there ordinance restrictions that we can alleviate that would make housing less expensive to build? Part of it is going up, part of it is, the intensity, the density of
Mhm,
development.
mhm.
Right.
Do we
don't
need
want
to increase that? Yeah, we don't want tenements. We've got to find a way to work around this. And there are some things in LD 1829 that say basically for affordable housing, they can come in and build at, is it 2.5 times the density of other things? So we just need to figure out whether or not the zoning is affecting the cost of housing and how to what extent.
one thing I can speak of is that I know from lending that it's pretty much the only way developers can make a workforce housing project work is with some sort of TIF or CEA as
Mhm.
well. And that's another thing to keep in mind, that if we're, that if all of a sudden, I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just saying it's, good, for multiple reasons. One, the reduced rents don't support the cost.
Right.
Second of all, I think literally when they apply for tax credits with the state, having a TIF it helps their score.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think the town would need to know that if they're gonna start trying to be aggressive and do these, that they're all gonna need TIFs.
Right.
Cause I don't think I've ever seen a workforce housing project that hasn't
Did-
required a TIF
right.
to
Right.
make the numbers,
Right.
and that needs to be understood as well.
Right. I'm gonna say,
This
so
is not, this is not a
go ahead.
new problem. I mean, I joined the planning board in 2004. We were offering density bonuses and everything else to people for workforce housing. None of it ever happened. And in fact, some of
Right.
these properties went through with the idea that they were going to be providing such housing, only to come back to the planning board later saying they couldn't do it.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is a problem, and maybe I haven't heard John's answer before, and I've seen the stuff going on from since 2004 on various committees I've been on. So if we really want to do something about this, we got to get serious and have a very structured approach to it. This is not going to be something we're going to
Right.
just stumble upon.
Well,
But I do think, I mean, starting at the simplest level, I do think we've, when we were at Piper Shores, I mean, housing
Mhm.
is absolutely needed for economic development. If you don't have housing, you don't attract people, you can't attract new people, you can't have jobs for the people that work
Mhm.
there, you can't, unless you want to have your 15-year-olds taking every job in the town, you gotta have places for people that are gonna work here to
Mhm.
live.
Mhm.
So I think from that, it definitely is critical to economic development. I would say, and
Yeah.
then. But if we want to work, do we want to meet or work with the Housing Alliance?
I think
I think
so.
absolutely, I would think.
Yeah, I'll support that.
Yeah.
I know, Portland Harbor Hotel a few years ago bought a hotel just for workforce housing. So they made the investment just so that they could keep,
That
They're
Ireland's just doing it now.
yeah, yeah.
And part of me wonders, it's the marketing part, is it, other than the economics, the term workforce housing, I think may distress some people for some reason. And part of me thinks, isn't what we're really talking about in some respects is starter housing. We don't have starter homes anymore that are being built, right? They don't exist.
Well, I mean, workforce housing, I think, was a term that came along to change the term from affordable housing.
Yeah.
Because of
Right,
this-
make the distinction.
And when the article that I read, what struck me was like, okay, you think workforce housing in Scarborough, well, workforce housing is described as for people making what, 90% of the local area median income?
That's-
In Scarborough, that's
That's
pretty
a lot.
high.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, like, I think to your point, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is, who qualifies. There's probably a lot of education that could be done.
Right.
Well, and I-
making 90% of the local area, the local median income in Scarborough is not a small amount.
Right.
It's probably higher than other
Right.
areas.
Well, and I think too that this is going to come down to, like, I think I said this at our retreat, is that this is going to come down to partnerships. It's going to have to come
Mhm.
down to main, Walmart, whatever, corporations or companies coming together and saying, we're investing in this for our employees.
Well, so again, I just Bath Iron Works, General Dynamics is partnering with the Navy and so there's a project cost, the cost of this renovation, the renovating is like 22 million.
Mhm,
Well, Bath Iron Works and the Navy are putting in 15 of that
mhm,
to do it because they
Mhm.
just need it. They
Mhm.
don't have any,
Cause then,
they don't have any place for their employees
Right.
to stay.
then you end up with indentured servants. And if
Well-
you lose your job, you lose your house.
Well, and then there's a lot, because
Pathway.
we talked about, do we build something at Piper Shores for our staff? And then the question was, well, what if they no longer work for us? Then they have to leave, do they have to
Right.
leave? And I don't know what the rules are. I don't know what the regulations are on any of that. So, there's the logistics of it too, that I think become very,
Well, it's also something that I think within our bailiwick is to say, you know what, maybe what we can contribute to the discussion is this more open forum with local employers to say how important, what's the demand for your employees? Tell us, what you think you need. And I don't think we have that. I think we have hearsay, we have some of the conversations like we've had with Maine Health. But have we had a broader conversation with folks to say, what's the real demand? And that is something that the council asked for. Can you identify, what that demand is? And I think like we did something simple and said, well, turns out, I think 69% of our public safety employees don't live in Scarborough. And those are some employees that really want to have close by, for emergencies. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why somebody doesn't want to live in Scarborough, but, is there something you can do
to support.
for the new folks coming in? There's no place for them to go. I mean, the average rents for I think a 2-bedroom apartment was $2,500 a month. And and I also don't know what to do with the fact that probably 95% of the people in Scarborough couldn't rebuy their house
Yeah.
if they had to right now. So I don't know what to do with that either. So there's a lot of gray area in the affordability issue. But I think to the extent that we can offer to work with the Housing Alliance to say this is important to us. Tell us how we can support some of the work that you're doing, on the policy perspective. And if that's going out and talking to businesses, we can do that.
I just want to mention this LD 1829 is going to not make a lot of residents happy
I know,
of Scarborough. I mean, this is some serious.
I know, it is. And I think that it's possible that this is gonna go the way of that senior subsidy that the state passed a couple of years ago that was reimbursing people, even if they moved around, they're gonna cap their property tax. That lasted 1 year before the state figured out, oops, we can't afford that. So I think 1 year of this, I think there'll be some amendments next year. And,
I think you're gonna get a lot of towns that are
Yeah.
really upset with it.
yeah, and we're trying to figure out, right now what this means, but obviously our growth cap will go by the wayside in the developed areas, which some people may not. I think there are good points and bad points about that.
So, I got 9:30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know
okay,
Alan has to leave.
I gotta
and
go.
I have
Yeah.
to leave. So
right.
can we
This other pieces can be postponed.
put on, okay. Anything else? Any other topics of conversation? Alan, anything else? And then you had,
No, I'm all set. Thank you. And Karen, I got your note. Thank you.
well, we're glad you're feeling well, Alan. We're glad you were able to make it today.
Looking forward to seeing everybody. Enjoy your summer.
You too, keep getting better. Take care.
Yep, thank you.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Right.
And John, congratulations on your new job. So
Thank you.
yes,
What's your new job, John?
I switched to it. I
Okay.
switched to Eddie Beatson Band.
Okay,
So it's down in 4 minutes.
one of the gentrifiers of Portland Waterhouse.
Yeah.
right?